I still have the voicemail. 13 seconds. That's it. 13 seconds long, and somehow it has followed me for 6 years like a ghost I keep feeding. And I know how unhealthy that sounds, believe me. I've had entire therapy sessions about why I still have it. I've opened my phone 100 different times ready to delete it, and every single time I just freeze. Because once it's gone, I think part of me is terrified that I'll lose the last piece of proof that any of this actually happened. And the crazy part, it's not even some dramatic recording. No screaming, no confession, no obvious cheating. Just laughing. A man I loved. Saying my best friend's name. And laughing like everything in the world was normal. I don't even know why that destroyed me the way it did. Maybe because laughter is intimate. Maybe because people don't laugh like that when things are broken. Or maybe I had already spent months feeling something was wrong, and that voicemail was the moment my body finally stopped letting me explain everything away. I don't know. I genuinely still don't know. There are things I'm about to say here that I have never fully said out loud. Not to my sister. Not even honestly to my therapist, which is kind of pathetic considering I've been paying that woman for 4 years to hear my problems. I've told edited versions of this story before. Clean versions. Versions where everybody sounds more mature and reasonable than they actually were. But the real version is messier than that. The real version still embarrasses me. Because I keep looking back at myself during that time thinking, how did you not see it sooner? And then another part of me immediately answers, because you trusted them. That's the whole reason. So, okay. I guess I have to go back about 6 years. I was 41 and newly divorced. And I need to say something honest right away because I think people hear, divorced woman in her 40s, and picture this devastated person falling apart dramatically. That wasn't me. No. That's not exactly true. I was devastated. Just quietly. My marriage had been emotionally dead for years before it officially ended. No cheating. No huge fights. Nothing dramatic enough to make a good story out of. It was worse than dramatic, honestly. It was slow. 2 people becoming roommates so gradually you almost don't notice it happening until one day you realize nobody has touched your heart in years. I remember sitting across from my husband at dinner sometimes thinking, if I disappeared emotionally right now, would he even notice? That feeling does something to you over time. Makes you hungry. And starving people mistake attention for safety all the time. When the divorce finally happened, I told everybody I was fine. I said all the healthy things. It was for the best. We grew apart. I'm excited for a new chapter. And part of me meant it. But another part of me, God, this is hard to admit. Another part of me was terrified that maybe this was it for me. Maybe this was the age where romantic love stopped happening and you just learned to build a decent enough life around the loneliness. Then came Carla. Well, Carla had already been there. She was my best friend. My real best friend. The kind where there's no separation anymore between your life and theirs. Daily phone calls. Shared holidays. Emergency contacts. Her kids called me Aunt Jen. She knew every ugly thing about me. Childhood stuff. The marriage stuff. The things I still can't say casually without my throat tightening. If something good happened, I called Carla first. If something terrible happened, I called Carla first. And that's why what happened next still feels so confusing even now. Because she was the safe place in my life. Or at least I thought she was. There's a man in this story. I'm gonna call him D. I met him at Carla's birthday party. And I can still replay the exact moment she introduced us because memory is cruel like that. Some moments stay crystal clear forever while entire years disappear. She grabbed my arm in the kitchen and pulled me toward him laughing. You two are going to love each other, she said. And I remember rolling my eyes because I thought she was trying to set me up. Dee was charming immediately. Not slick charming. Not salesman charming. He felt easy. Warm. Like somebody genuinely interested in who you were. We talked for almost 3 hours that night. 3 hours. And when I got home, I stood in my bathroom taking off my makeup smiling at myself like a teenager because for the first time since my divorce, I felt chosen again. That's the embarrassing truth. Felt seen. What I didn't know, what I could not possibly have known, was that when Carla introduced us that night, she had already been sleeping with him for 4 months. And no, I did not know. I need to say that clearly because I've spent years replaying this, trying to identify the exact moment I should have been smarter. The exact clue I missed. As if solving the mystery retroactively could somehow protect the older version of me. But trust doesn't work like that. You see what your heart is prepared to see. And at that point, my heart still believed both of them were safe. I didn't realize it then. But that belief was already starting to destroy me. Dee and I started dating almost immediately after that party. And looking back now, I can admit I fell way too fast. Like, aggressively fast. The kind of fast where your friends would normally pull you aside and tell you to calm down a little. Except the person who should have been warning me was Carla. And she wasn't warning me. She was encouraging it. That's the part that still twists something in my stomach all these years later. She wasn't distant. She wasn't weird in obvious ways. If anything, she acted excited for me. She asked about him constantly. How was the date? Do you like him? What did he say? And because she was my best friend, I told her everything. Literally everything. The good parts. The awkward parts. The things he said that made me blush like I was 22 instead of a divorced woman in her 40s trying to rebuild her life. I trusted her completely. And honestly, I trusted him pretty quickly too. Because after years of emotional starvation inside my marriage, Dee felt overwhelming in the best possible way. He paid attention. Real attention. Not performative attention. He remembered things. Tiny things. One time I mentioned this stupid story about how my dad used to bring home cheap grocery store cupcakes after fights with my mom because that was apparently his version of emotional repair. And like 3 weeks later, Dee walked past a grocery store with me, stopped suddenly and said, "Should we get the apology cupcakes?" And I remember laughing so hard I almost cried because, I don't know, being remembered feels intimate. Especially after years of feeling invisible. That's what nobody tells you after a long emotionally dead relationship. You become so deprived of tenderness that basic care starts feeling extraordinary. And honestly, part of me kept waiting for it to disappear. Good things usually did. So every time he texted me good morning, every time he reached for my hand first, every time he looked at me like I mattered, I felt relieved and suspicious at the exact same time. I should have paid more attention to the suspicious part. About 2 months in, something happened that bothered me for the first time. Not dramatically. Just enough to leave this weird little scratch in my brain. We had plans for dinner on a Thursday night. Nothing special. And a couple hours beforehand he texted me. Something came up. Can't make it tonight. I'll explain later. Fine. Adults cancel plans. But then he disappeared. Not fully. Technically he answered me. But the energy changed immediately. Short text. Delayed responses. Almost 2 full days where I felt like I was reaching toward someone standing just out of range. And this is where Carla becomes important again. 'Cause I called her. Course I called her. I remember pacing my apartment saying, "Something feels weird." And without missing a beat she said, "He's probably stressed. He's terrible at communication when work gets overwhelming." Now here's the thing that makes me sick looking back. Dee had already told me that exact thing about himself earlier in the relationship. I'm bad at communicating. That sentence became the excuse for everything after that. Every silence. Every weird shift. Every moment where my instincts tried to warn me. It's like he handed me the script ahead of time for how to misunderstand his behavior. And Carla reinforced it constantly. He's just overwhelmed. He shuts down sometimes. Don't spiral. Don't spiral. I clung to that phrase because I was trying so hard not to become that woman. You know, the paranoid woman. The insecure divorced woman projecting old fears onto a new relationship. I wanted to be emotionally healthy so badly that I started dismissing perfectly reasonable instincts. And I think betrayal depends on that sometimes. Depends on your willingness to override yourself. 3 months into the relationship, Dee told me he loved me. And God, I hate how clearly I remember it. We were sitting in my car outside a restaurant while it rained. Which sounds fake and cinematic, but that's genuinely how it happened. He turned toward me and just said it. I love you. And what really got me wasn't the words. It was the way he looked when he said them. Terrified. Like the sentence escaped before he planned to say it. I believed him immediately. Completely. That's the humiliating truth. I didn't question it for even a second. Because when somebody reaches for you emotionally after years of neglect, your whole body wants to believe the rescue is real. I called Carla the next morning. I was smiling like an idiot walking around my apartment with coffee in my hand while telling her everything. And she sounded happy for me. She did. But there was this moment, this tiny weird moment, where I said, I think I love him too. And she went quiet for just slightly too long. Maybe 2 seconds. That was it. And I noticed it. I actually noticed it in real time. There was this flicker inside me. This tiny animal feeling that something underneath the conversation had shifted. But then immediately I buried it. She's distracted. You're imagining things. Stop overthinking. I did that constantly back then. Explained away every discomfort before it could fully form. And honestly, I think some part of me already understood there was tension around Dee and Carla before I consciously knew why. Your body notices patterns before your brain catches up sometimes. That realization still unsettles me. Because now when I replay that time in my head, I keep finding these microscopic moments where instinct tried to tap me on the shoulder and I just ignored it. Not because I was stupid. 'Cause I trusted them. That's different. And the first real crack in everything didn't happen because of Dee. It happened because of something Carla casually said one night while we were washing dishes together. One sentence. One tiny mistake. And the second she said it, my stomach dropped so hard I actually felt dizzy. I didn't realize it then. But that was the moment reality started slipping. I was at Carla's house for dinner when it happened. Normal night. Completely normal. Her husband grilling outside. Kids running through the living room screaming about some game. Music playing quietly from one of those little kitchen speakers everybody owns now. I had been in that house so many times it felt automatic. Like muscle memory. That matters because what happened next was tiny. Teeny. The kind of thing another person probably wouldn't even remember later. But I remember it because my body reacted before my brain did. After dinner, her husband took the kids upstairs for bed and Carla and I stayed in the kitchen cleaning up. Wine glasses in the sink. Dishwasher open. Totally ordinary. We were talking about Dee casually when she mentioned something he had said to me earlier that week. Not generally. Specifically. Private conversation. One of those weird little intimate couple conversations that nobody else should know because why would they? And I froze. Not dramatically. Just internally. I remember standing there holding a wet plate thinking, wait, how does she know that? The scary part is my brain immediately started protecting her before I even asked the question. Maybe I mentioned it. Maybe he mentioned it. Maybe I'm remembering wrong. That's how deeply I trusted her. My first instinct wasn't suspicion. It was self-correction. But something about the confidence in her voice bothered me. Like she wasn't repeating information. She was familiar with it. So I looked at her and said, wait, did he tell you that? And she stumbled for half a second. Tiny pause. What? Oh, no, I think you mentioned it. I tried to remember. Did I? Honestly, I couldn't tell. And that's another thing betrayal does to you long before you realize you're being betrayed. It destabilizes your confidence in yourself first. I remember laughing awkwardly and saying, maybe. Then I let it go. I let it go. God, that sentence follows me around now. Because looking back, I think that was the first moment my instincts fully tried to warn me. Not with evidence. Not with certainty. Just discomfort. But discomfort is easy to silence when love and trust are louder. After that night, things with Dee started feeling slightly inconsistent. Not bad. That's important. If things had become obviously terrible, maybe I would have reacted faster. But inconsistency is harder to confront because it leaves room for hope. Some days he was incredibly attentive. Present. Other days he'd disappear emotionally for hours or even a full day and come back acting completely normal, like no shift had happened at all. And every single time I felt anxious about it, I called Carla. That part still hurts in this almost unbearable way because the person helping me process my confusion was part of the confusion, and I had no idea. I remember sitting on my couch one night staring at my phone because Dee hadn't answered me in hours after making plans with me. I called Carla and said, "Am I overreacting?" And immediately she said, "No, honestly, men get weird when they're stressed. Don't spiral." Again with that phrase. Don't spiral. I held on to it because I was trying so hard to become someone emotionally secure after my divorce. I didn't want to be suspicious. I didn't want to become hypervigilant and exhausting. But looking back now, I think I confused emotional maturity with emotional self-abandonment. There's a difference. About 5 months into the relationship, Carla called me one afternoon, and the second I heard her voice, my stomach dropped. You know when your body senses danger before words happen? That feeling. She sounded careful. Too careful. She said, "Hey, I need to talk to you about something." And instantly my brain went to worst-case scenarios. Accident. Illness. Something horrible. But then she started talking, and somehow what she said felt even worse. She told me she was worried about Dee. Not dramatic worried. Concerned worried. Calculated worried. She said she had heard things about him from mutual friends. About an ex-girlfriend. About lying. About him telling different stories to different people. And the way she framed it was so convincing because she sounded reluctant. Like she didn't want to hurt me but morally couldn't stay silent. "I didn't know if I should tell you," she kept saying. I'd feel awful if I stayed quiet." I remember gripping my kitchen counter so hard my fingers hurt because this was the man I had started imagining a future with. And now my best friend, the safest person in my life, was quietly suggesting he might not be who I thought he was. I asked what exactly she'd heard. She hesitated. Then said his ex had been really hurt. That phrase lodged itself directly into my chest. Really hurt. Not details. Just emotional fog. Enough to destabilize me without giving me anything concrete to challenge. Then I asked how she knew all this. She said a mutual friend told her. Someone connected to his ex. I asked why she waited so long to tell me. And she said she hoped the rumors weren't true. That she didn't want to ruin something good if it was all misunderstanding. And here's the part that still humiliates me. Thanked her. I literally thanked her. Because at that moment I thought she was protecting me. After we hung up, I sat alone in my kitchen for almost an hour staring at the floor thinking maybe this was the moment adulthood actually begins. Maybe this was where I stopped being naive and started asking harder questions. I almost ended the relationship right there. I rehearsed conversations in my head all night. But instead, I told Dee what Carla said. Not accusingly. Carefully. Often. And the second I mentioned Carla's name, something crossed his face that I still can't fully describe. Not guilt. Not surprise. Something colder. He got very quiet and asked, "What exactly did she say?" Told him. And after this long silence, he said something that made my entire body go cold. "That's interesting. Not that's false. Not she's lying. That's interesting." I asked him what that meant. And then he looked at me in this strange, exhausted way and said, "There are things about Carla I haven't told you because I didn't want to put you in the middle." And right there, before he even explained anything, I think some part of me realized my entire understanding of both of them was about to change. The second Dee said, "There are things about Carla I haven't told you." I felt this horrible rush of panic through my whole body. Because suddenly it wasn't just a relationship problem anymore. It was her too. And once your safest person becomes part of the instability, your brain has nowhere left to stand. I remember staring at him thinking, just say it. Whatever this is, just say it. But he hesitated. And honestly, I hate hesitations now. Really do. Ever since all of this happened, pauses feel dangerous to me. Anytime someone takes too long to answer a direct question, my nervous system reacts before my mind does. He looked exhausted. Not caught. Exhausted. And he said, "I don't want to say this wrong." At the time that sounded thoughtful. Careful. Sure. Now I think people usually say that right before they say something life-altering. I told him to just tell me. But he didn't. Not that night. He said he needed time to figure out how to explain it without making things worse. And somehow I accepted that answer. I went home and barely slept. I kept replaying every interaction between the three of us in my head. Every dinner, every joke, every weird feeling I had buried before it could fully form. But even then, I still didn't understand the full truth. Part of me honestly thought maybe Carla had developed feelings for him after introducing us. Or maybe there had been flirting before we got serious. Something emotionally messy but survivable. I had no idea how far back it actually went. And unbelievably, we still went on the lake trip. No. I know how insane that sounds now. But uncertainty makes people cling harder sometimes, not walk away. I wanted clarity so badly that I convinced myself a weekend alone together would finally make everything make sense. I thought answers would calm me down. I didn't realize answers can ruin your life too. The lake house was beautiful, which honestly still annoys me. I hate that some of my ugliest memories happened somewhere peaceful. Trees, water, silence. Meanwhile, my entire understanding of my life was collapsing in real time. The first night was tense. Not openly tense. We weren't fighting. But there was pressure underneath every conversation. Like both of us knew something enormous was waiting nearby. The second night he finally told me. We were sitting outside after dinner. I had a blanket wrapped around me because it was colder than we expected near the water. And very quietly, like he was trying not to scare me, he said, "Before Carla introduced us, we slept together." I swear my brain stopped processing for a second. I just stared at him. Then I asked, "What do you mean slept together?" As if there was another possible interpretation. He said it happened about 8 months before the party where we met. That word echoed in my head immediately because suddenly all I could picture was Carla grabbing my arm at that party, smiling while already knowing what he looked like naked. I actually said it out loud without meaning to. She knew. And Dee nodded. Quietly. He said it wasn't serious. Said it had ended before he met me. Said they were just friends by the time we started dating. Supposedly. But then my brain immediately jumped to the real question. Why didn't anybody tell me? Before the first date. Before I fell in love. Before I started building trust around people who already shared a history I knew nothing about. And honestly, his answers weren't good enough. Even now, 6 years later, I can admit that clearly. He said he didn't think it mattered because it was over. Said he didn't want to create unnecessary complications. Said he assumed Carla would tell me herself if she wanted me to know. But underneath all of that was another truth he didn't say directly. Telling me early might have cost him the relationship. And he didn't want to risk that. That realization hurt almost as much as the secret itself. Because people love to frame dishonesty as confusion or fear or protecting feelings. But sometimes people hide information simply because honesty threatens something they want. And they decide your right to make informed choices matters less than their desire to keep you. I sat there completely still after he told me. No crying. No yelling. Just cold. I remember feeling physically cold all over. And weirdly enough, I think I started grieving Carla before I fully grieved him. Because his betrayal hurt. But hers rearranged my entire understanding of friendship. Every conversation suddenly felt different in retrospect. Every time she asked about him. Every piece of advice she gave me. Every reassurance. And then suddenly her warning phone call made sense too. Or at least, a terrifying version of sense. Because now I understood she had a personal reason to want us apart. And once I saw that possibility, I couldn't unsee it. I asked Dee when he decided to finally tell me. And he said, "When you told me Carla was warning you about me. That's what changed it." Hearing that she was trying to destabilize the relationship apparently pushed him into confessing. And here's the complicated part that still bothers me. I believed him. Not blindly, not romantically, but instinctively. I believed he was telling the truth about Carla. And that realization was horrifying because it didn't make him innocent. Just made everything murkier. Two people had information that fundamentally changed my understanding of my own relationship. And both of them made decisions about that information based on protecting themselves emotionally. Not me. Neither of them chose me first. That sentence took years to fully settle into my body. Neither of them chose me first. When we got back from the trip, I called Carla immediately. And honestly, part of me still expected her to deny everything. I don't know why. Maybe because once someone has occupied the safe person role in your life long enough, your brain resists replacing that image even when evidence is screaming at you. She answered on the second ring. I told her Dee confessed. And there was this long silence. Long enough that I checked my screen to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Then she said quietly, "He told you." Not confusion, not denial, just defeat. And right there, before she explained anything else, I knew my life was about to split into a before and after version forever. When Carla said, "He told you," I remember my whole body going still. Not emotional stillness. Physical. Like my system just locked up for a second because it recognized something irreversible had just happened. There was no denial in her voice. No surprise. Just this quiet, almost tired acceptance. And that told me everything before she even explained a single word. I asked her again very slowly, "Why didn't you tell me?" And she immediately started crying. Like instantly. Which sounds like it should soften things, right? And in another situation maybe it would've. But in that moment, the crying didn't feel like relief or honesty. It felt like collapse without accountability. She kept saying, "I can explain." Over and over again. "I can explain." And I just remember thinking, I don't want explanations right now. I want truth. We agreed to meet the next day at a coffee shop. She canceled. Then she canceled again. And by the third attempt, I was already starting to understand something I didn't want to understand. People don't postpone truth because they're preparing it. They postpone it because they're trying to control how badly it lands. We finally met 3 days later. I still remember the exact table we sat at. Near the window. Too bright outside. Summer light making everything feel harsher than it needed to be. And Carla talked. He talked a lot. About confusion. About timing. About how complicated things had been with Dee. About how she panicked when she saw us together at her birthday party. She said she didn't know how to stop what had already started. And I remember sitting there listening thinking, but you did stop it. You just stopped it in the direction that protected you. Because that's what nobody says out loud in moments like that. Confusion still produces decisions. And every decision she described had one consistent outcome. I stayed in the dark. But the most painful part wasn't even what she said. It was what she didn't say. No clear apology. No simple acknowledgement. No, I should have told you the truth immediately. Just layers of explanation sitting on top of discomfort, like she was trying to build something soft enough that she wouldn't have to touch the sharpest part of it. At one point she looked at me and said, "I hope you can understand how hard this was for me too." And I remember something in me just shutting down. Because even then, even in that moment, she was still centering her emotional experience inside my betrayal. That's when I realized understanding and accountability are not the same thing. Not even close. I left that coffee shop feeling strangely empty. Not angry yet. Not fully grieving. Just hollow in a way that made everything feel slightly unreal. And then I got home. And that's when the voicemail happened. Or more accurately, that's when I realized what I had already received without fully processing it. Dee had called me earlier that day, while I was with Carla, and I hadn't listened to it yet. I pressed play standing in my kitchen, and at first, it sounded like nothing. Background noise, movement, casual atmosphere. And then I heard laughter. His laughter. And I remember thinking, even before I understood context, why is he laughing right now? Then I heard another voice. And my stomach dropped instantly because I recognized the rhythm of it before my brain fully named it. And then I heard him say it. Carla's name. He said her name. And I swear to God, everything inside me went silent. Not emotional silence. Complete internal shutdown. I replayed it immediately. Then again. And again. Trying to force context into something that was only 13 seconds long. But it refused to become clear. Stayed ambiguous. That's what made it so damaging. Because ambiguity is the kind of uncertainty your mind cannot resolve cleanly. You start filling in blanks whether you want or not. Were they together? Was it innocent? Was he talking about her? Was this some completely harmless situation that I was now poisoning with my own fear? I didn't know. And the worst part is, I still don't know. Called D immediately. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. And when he answered, I didn't even try to be calm. I just asked, "Why were you with Carla?" Long pause. Then he said, "I wasn't with her." Too fast. Too clean. Then he started explaining quickly, too quickly, about coincidence and timing and mutual friends and how I was misunderstanding it. And my body was already reacting before my brain could argue. Because over-explaining is its own kind of language. I asked him directly, "Are you still involved with her?" And he said, "No." Immediately. No hesitation. And I remember thinking, I want to believe you so badly it hurts. But something in me had already started breaking away from needing him to be right. Over the next few weeks, I lived in a kind of emotional distortion I didn't even know was possible. Nothing felt stable. Not memories. Not conversations. Not even my own judgment. I would replay moments from months earlier and suddenly they would look different. A smile that now felt loaded. Pause that now felt intentional. A sentence that now carried double meaning. It was like someone had taken my entire lived experience and added a second layer of meaning underneath it without telling me. And I couldn't decide which layer was real anymore. That's the part nobody prepares you for. Not the betrayal itself, but the way it rewrites your memory while you're still trying to live inside it. And eventually, I reached a point where I understood something I didn't want to accept. Even if Dee and Carla were telling me the truth now, even if everything was somehow explainable, it didn't erase what had already happened inside me. Because I had made real emotional decisions based on incomplete reality. Had loved. I had trusted. Had planned. And none of it had been built on full information. That realization was the beginning of the end. 3 weeks later I ended things with Dee. But what happened after that? Hurt in a completely different way than I expected. Breaking up with Dee wasn't clean. Didn't feel clean. It wasn't one of those moments where you feel strong and certain and like you're choosing yourself in some empowering way. Felt more like exhaustion finally winning. Like I had been holding my breath underwater for too long and eventually my body just stopped waiting for permission to come up. When I told him it was over, he didn't argue much. That surprised me. Part of me expected a fight. Or denial. Or even relief. But instead he just looked tired. Like he understood exactly why I was doing it. And that made it worse in a strange way. Because it confirmed there wasn't going to be a final explanation that fixed everything. No last-minute clarity. No single sentence that would make the whole situation make sense in a clean line. Just distance. After that, I went home and sat in my apartment for hours doing nothing. No crying immediately. Just sitting there. Staring at walls. Feeling like my life had split into two versions and I didn't know which one I was supposed to live in anymore. Because here's the thing nobody really talks about. The end of a relationship doesn't erase the version of you that existed inside it. That version still stays behind for a while. I kept thinking about small things. The cupcake story. The good morning text. The car rides. The way I used to smile at my phone without realizing it. And now all of it felt slightly contaminated, like I was remembering someone else's life. But losing Dee wasn't the hardest part. Not even close. Losing Carla was. Because that didn't feel like a breakup. Felt like losing a foundation. And the strange part is, it didn't happen dramatically. There was no final conversation that ended it. No clear rupture. Just faded. She stopped calling as much. I stopped calling back as quickly. Texts got shorter, then rarer, then mostly stopped. And we never actually said, "This is over." We just quietly stopped being what we were. And that silence, that slow disappearance, somehow hurt more than a fight would have. Because fights at least confirm something still exists underneath them. Silence just erases. I still think about her sometimes in ways that confuse me. Not the version of her at the end. That version feels distant now. But the earlier version, the one who knew everything about me. The one I trusted without hesitation. The one I called first when my life was falling apart. Her kids stopped calling me Aunt Jen. That was one of the hardest parts in a way I didn't expect. Because children don't understand emotional complexity. They just understand presence. And then one day, absence becomes normal. About a year later, I ran into Carla at a mutual friend's baby shower. And I remember seeing her across the room before she saw me. My body reacted before my mind did. Not anger, not even sadness. Something closer to recognition. Like seeing a version of my life I used to belong in. We hugged. We actually hugged. And that's the part that still confuses me even now. Because it wasn't fake. It wasn't cold. It was emotional, but also deeply complicated. We stood there for a moment making small talk like nothing catastrophic had ever passed between us. "How have you been?" "Good, busy." "How are the kids?" "They're good, getting so big." And underneath all of it was this unbearable awareness that we both knew there were entire worlds of conversation we were not going to have. Before leaving, she said something like, "We should get coffee sometime." And I said, "Yeah, definitely." We never did. And honestly, I don't think either of us ever truly intended to. Because by that point, the damage wasn't something a conversation could fix anymore. It was structural. Over time, I've tried to understand what happened. Not just factually, but emotionally. And I've gone through every possible interpretation in my head. Was Carla acting out of fear? Was Dee protecting himself? Was I just too trusting? Was I naive? My therapist has a theory I still wrestle with. She says people sometimes make deeply self-protective choices that unintentionally harm others because they're trying to avoid emotional consequences they don't feel equipped to face. Maybe that's true. Maybe Carla didn't wake up one day deciding to hurt me. Maybe she just kept avoiding one difficult moment after another until the situation became impossible to fix without destroying everything. And maybe Dee did something similar. Maybe everyone involved was just trying to manage discomfort instead of confronting it directly. There are days I can accept that explanation. And there are days I can't. Because explanation doesn't undo impact. And that's the part one keep coming back to. Even if nobody intended harm, harm still happened. And I still had to live inside the aftermath of it. The hardest realization for me wasn't that I was lied to. It was that I trusted people who didn't protect my trust. And after everything, I still had to rebuild my understanding of what that means. Not just about them, but about myself. Because for a long time I kept asking the wrong question. Not what happened, but what did I miss? As if I could go back and find the exact moment I should have been smarter. The exact second I should have known. But there isn't one. That's the truth I had to eventually accept. There wasn't a moment I failed. There was just a situation I couldn't fully see while I was inside it. And I think that's the only thing I can say now with any certainty. I trusted two people I loved. They made choices that didn't protect me. And I spent years trying to turn that into a story where I was somehow responsible for not preventing it. But I wasn't. And maybe the most important thing I can say at the end of all this is this. Trusting someone is not the mistake. What they do with that trust is. And I still have the voicemail. Not because I want to stay stuck there. Not because I want to punish myself. But because some part of me is still trying to understand a moment that never fully resolves no matter how many times I replay it. 13 seconds. Man laughing. A name I can't forget. And a version of my life that I can never fully return to. And I think, I'm finally starting to understand that I don't have to solve it anymore. I just have to let it be what it was. Something that happened. Something that changed me. And something I survived.